Hey guys, welcome back. We are going to be heading into John 9, so let's head on over there. Again, I am using BibleHub.com, a simple place. Look up your version that you read, and you can follow along with me. This makes it a little bit easier than me constantly looking down at my Bible, and so you guys can just follow right along. All right, getting right into it. So John 9, 1. Now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So remember that this is first century Pharisaical Judaism, right? And the thought was that you would be blessed by tradition, right? You'd be born whole, okay? And if something was wrong, if you were born with some sort of birth defect, that was an eternal judgment, a divine judgment. So I guess I shouldn't say eternal, right? But it is a divine judgment. So meaning somebody in either, whether it was those parents or somebody in their generation, and those before them had sinned. And so this was a consequence of sin, and that is what they believed. So this man being born blind would have been believed to be of sin, okay? And he would not have been able to receive any kind of healing until the kingdom, okay? So in their eyes, after death, essentially, because they fail to believe that the kingdom is here, right? And so, verse 3, Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned. See, he's contrasting what they believed, right? But that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Okay, he's making some references here. He's not talking about physically day and night. Okay, he's talking about him and the kingdom being there and darkness of the world, right? That would be when sin is taking over the world, right? And Jesus not being there. And so he's not talking about day and night. And so when he had said these things, he spat on the ground, and he made clay with the saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said to him, go and wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. So remember that they have to have a show of faith, right, and belief in Jesus before they're healed, right? And so the clay in and of itself that Jesus put it on and anointed him with, he could have healed him, but he didn't, because this man needed to show an act of faith first. So when the man went down to the pool, that was his act of faith. That was his act of believing that it could be done and would be done. And then he came back seeing. Okay. Therefore, the neighbors and those who previously had seen that he was blind said, is this not he who sat and begged? And some said, this is he. Others said, he is like him. He said, I am he. Therefore they said to him, how were your eyes opened? He answered and said, a man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes, and said to me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and I received sight. Then they said to him, where is he? And he said, I do not know. Okay, so we're going to move on. We're actually going to do all of John 9. And as we progress through the Gospels here, the next several chapters, we will, I believe all but one, we will complete almost a chapter per video. And so we will continue along to the other side of the story where the Pharisees come in. Okay, so they brought him who formerly was blind to see the Pharisees. Now it was a Sabbath when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. And then the Pharisees also asked him, saying, how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put clay on my eyes, I washed it, and I see. Right? Point blank, very simple. Therefore, some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath, right? And so, again, they're constantly attacking this healing on the Sabbath, and Jesus addresses this over and over again. This seems to be the go-to point for the Pharisees here. Let's keep going. Others said, how could a man who is a sinner do such signs? And there was division among them. And so this, how could it be a messianic miracle, right? Like they contradict themselves, and he can't, they're trying to catch him in breaking the Sabbath, right? But how can he be breaking the Sabbath if he's a sinner? right? Like if it doesn't make any sense. How could he even done the healing if he wasn't the Messiah, and he wouldn't be breaking the Sabbath? If he wasn't, they just contradict themselves. They keep going round and round. That's why Jesus continually, for the next several chapters, calls them hypocrites. And so, let's keep going. And so he said, he is a prophet. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight, until they called the parents of him who had received his sight. And they asked them, saying, Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see? His parents answered them and said, We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now sees, we do not know. Or who opened his eyes, we do not know. He is of age. Ask him. He will speak for himself. His parents said these things because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had agreed already that if anyone confessed that he was Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. And therefore his parents said, He is of age. Ask him. And so what they're talking about here is, as you saw in the description, is being excommunicated, right? And so if they would have professed their belief in Jesus as the healer here, they would have been excommunicated. And so this is clearly not a young boy, right? This is a grown man. He can speak for himself. And so that's the fear. And remember, we spoke of the terminology of the Jews, right? And so it's not always a person of the Jew, it's the leaders, and that's who he's talking about here, is the leader. So when he says he feared the Jews, that's what's being spoken of. And so verse 24, so they again called the man who was blind and said to him, Give God the glory. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered and said, Whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I know, though I was blind, and now I see. And then they said to him again, What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? Being a little sarcastic there, right? And so then they reviled him and said, You are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we do not know where he is from. The man answered and said to them, Why is this a marvelous thing, that you do not know where he is from? Yet he's opened my eyes. Now we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears him. Since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered and said to him, You are completely born in sin, and you are teaching us. And then they cast him out. They refused to be reasoned with, right? They had this idea, this concept in their head that Jesus is a sinner, he's not the Messiah, and that's that. They don't care what this man had to say, right? And he very clearly answered them, I've already told you, you're not going to believe me now. Jesus actually says words very similar throughout the Gospels, right? I've already showed you. I've already told you. And if you didn't believe me then, you're not going to believe me now, right? And so this is the first time that this particular healing has been recorded in Scripture. And so the healing of a man born blind, right? And they, the Jews in a sense, would have understood this to be a messianic miracle. And so the three so far